you.
Oh, sure.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this EPC event. First of all, I would like to say that my thoughts and prayers today are with the people of Ukraine. Like many of you, I listened to President Zelensky's extremely moving speech in the European Parliament earlier today. The situation in Ukraine is critical. It is heartbreaking. Russia's premeditated, brutal war against Ukraine continues to escalate, leaving a trail of destruction and death behind. Innocent Ukrainians are being slaughtered. War crimes are being committed every day. Brave Ukrainians are fighting with everything they have for their country, for their freedom, for democracy, for all of us. I have to say that I'm in total awe of them. We as the EU, the West, all of Ukrainians' partners must do more, much more to help them. Every morning when you wake up, the first thing you should have on your mind is, what can I do for Ukraine today? Today we are here to hear from our speakers the current situation and what the West, not least the EU, can be doing more to help Ukraine. What do Ukrainians need now? And most urgently, what more can be done to squeeze Russia? So briefly, we are joined today by Gennadiy Druzenko, who is a constitutional lawyer by trade. Now he's head of the first voluntary military hospital and has become a soldier. We have Luke Harding, a journalist from The Guardian, who is reporting as well from Ukraine. He's in Lviv, I believe. And last but not least, Vasyl Filipchuk, who's senior fellow at the Center for Policy Studies. The colleague from UNDP, who was due to join us, has had to drop out, not surprisingly, because they are absolutely under so much pressure. So I'm going to start today by giving the floor to you, Gennadiy. Please, the floor is yours, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, because it's really not just a battle of Ukraine and Russia, it is really a battle of democratic world and like autocratic universe, tyranny and freedom, dignity and slavery and things like that. It is very clear. For us and for my fellow veterans of the Russian-Ukrainian war, it was just another scale, but nothing new in this Russian full-scale attack. It was great, big surprise for Russians who expected something like it was in Crimea, but met here devoted resistance, devoted defense, and lost now more than 5,000 military guys here in Ukraine. Hundreds of helicopters, tanks, armored machine, and so on and so forth. The case is not just the armed forces of Ukraine defense our territory, defense our cities, villages, but a lot of people, like civilian people like me. I am a lawyer by my education. I studied in Great Britain. I was a Fulbright scholar. So for me, it's far more usual to spend time in the libraries and the universities, not with like automatic guns in my hand. But anyway, a lot of people like me very swiftly converted to the fighters for their homes, for their freedoms, for our future, for our fundamental right to decide how to live. So it was a great surprise for Putin. Even the most Russian-speaking cities like Kharkiv defended themselves with great bravery, with great patriotism, to say. Maybe after this war, the Ukrainian already Ukrainian is far more united than it was a week ago. I don't know anybody, Russian, Ukrainian speaking, Orthodox, Greek Catholics, atheists, who supports in a way Russian troops. From the information on the ground, because guys around me, some of them professional military guys who is from the military, veterans of military intelligence, and know situation quite well. We coordinated very closely. So they say Russian Most of Russians do not understand what happens finally. They was sent like to protect somebody, but people, even unarmed people, like it was in Bergansk, just crowded, stop the tanks and say, Putin's go home. We do not invite you to Ukraine, in Russian language, which Russians understand quite well. What to say? Even though we are really proud of our president, because unlike the previous one, he do not sign it some humiliating agreement like Minsk one. He say we stand for Ukraine, and that is a great news. Unfortunately, even though his leadership was at least controversial, a lot of very good professional was fired from the service, and particularly from the military service. Still, the people now supported him, so because what he says, that is my position, that is position 99% of Ukraine. We stand, and the end of this war could be just one. That all Ukrainian territories, internationally recognized, should be back to Ukraine, including Crimea, including Donbass. If not, we are ready to fight. It wasn't our choice to attack, but if we was attacked and experienced how effectively with not most state-of-art weapons, not greatest in world like logistic and so on and so forth, how we effectively destroy Russian troops. I think we now are the only nation in the world who do not afraid Russians, who have experience to win Russians, and who are very expired. Just one example, we are like a volunteer unit. We used to be like a medical units, but now it's like a half military, half medical unit. So we united together, fighters and medics, and work together, because it's quite dangerous to drive on Kyiv without like fighters, without soldiers. But anyway, we just ask it tomorrow at 1 o'clock, about 1 o'clock. I just wrote the post in Facebook and say, my people are a bit angry. We have like some bread, some tea, some basic food. But if somebody could feed us normally, we would be thankful. 2 hours later, we got a proposal from 2 restaurants, which are closed now, by the way. And we was so touched. It was not just a good food, restaurant food, in fact. On the every part of this, like, package of food was like a wishes. We are with you. You are the winner. We just love you from these girls. My fathers, who saw a lot of killing, just were tearing. They have tear on their cheeks. It was unbelievable. So even though that is the biggest tragedy of Ukraine for and after the World War II, that is now very clear. They bomb us, they attack us by missiles, they send tank on our land. The inspiration of most of people are really so great. Sure that now I believe hundreds of thousands flee Ukraine, and that is quite normal. People, some have children, some have elderly people, and that is unfortunately war not for that categories of the civilians, but who stay here in the, particularly in the capital, which is the one battlefield for this war, behave quite bravely. Most of young people demanded the weapons in their hand, and the solidarity of the people so great. I don't remember since like that since Maidan 8 years ago, when you experience something in my youthhood was called communism, when you need whatever you really need it, when you get whatever you needed quite soon and swiftly. So I'm quite optimistic. Unfortunately, I believe that is now impossible just stop somewhere on the middle. So that Putin is so angry because Ukraine do not want and will not stand on the knee before him. we are fight effectively. Our casualties at least 10 times lesser than the Russian ones. So that now he was joined to my by my information today by Belarusian forces, but that is a small number of fighters. Unfortunately, we have a very popular anecdote here. He is quite linguistic one, but I try to translate. So there is one of the discussion between Ukrainians and Russian, how to say in Ukraine or on Ukraine, na Ukraine or v Ukraine. We Ukrainians say in Ukraine, they say like on Ukraine, because so that people on Ukrainians now joking that the Russian soldiers believed that they come on Ukrainian land, but we repeated for them a lot of time that the right pronunciation is not on the land but in Ukraine. So many of them will be lost in Ukrainian soil. Unfortunately, that is really tragic things, but we have no choice but to defend our families. By the way, in this room where I am, at least two guys, I and my military friend, who is my neighbor, we just lost our homes because all bridges to them was destroyed. We don't know about buildings and such, but now there is no access. Even we would like just to swim, but it is quite cold now. So there is no panic. There is a great sense of solidarity. There is huge inspiration to defend our land, and really proud of our armed forces, because fighters like me, okay, we could fight with like soldiers with boots on the ground. We couldn't fight with jets, we couldn't fight with missiles, but so far Ukrainian armed forces defend very efficiently. For me, is really biggest surprise of this war. Still, the casualties is big, but not tragic to say, or not something which could broke our spirit. Let's see. I believe finally, to conclude my short and sorry, a bit emotional observation, if we could stay and defend until the end of this week, it would be more. This war became more problematic for Russia than for Ukraine. And thank work for standing with us. I never believed that somebody will fight shoulder to shoulder like Americans, because maybe just Ukrainians do not afraid Russians, at least fighters. But your help is now so inspiring and so tangible to say. We really see how economic sanction really could work and never worked before. How at least democratic work solidarity punish Russians, because Russians select Putin finally, and inspire Ukrainians. And that is really something new in our history, because our freedom fighting 100 years ago and during World War II, we was alone in these battles. But now the world, at least democratic, worked with us. That is very new and very inspiring news for us. I say it times and times to my friends from the West. We have hundreds of thousands of hands who could and will take the arms to defend our lands. We have hundreds of thousands of brave hearts, but we need effective modern arms in these hands. And finally, we got it. Very timely, we got it, really, like javelins, like a one, and stingers and things like that. And now whole world see how Ukrainian master in using these weapons.
Thank you very much, Gennadiy. Honestly, you're a really courageous and inspirational guy. I mean, you're sitting there in Kiev in the midst of a war zone. Really, I'm really inspired by you, and you're so happy. You come across so cheerful as well. So I would like to come back to you in a bit with a few questions, but I want to turn now to Luke. Luke's in a different part of Ukraine, so maybe you can give us your insights into what you're seeing, what you're feeling, Luke, what you see as the next steps in this barbaric war.
Yeah, thanks very much. Greetings from Lviv, where I've been for the past few days, having exited Kyiv soon after the invasion. I mean, it's interesting listening to Gennadiy. I mean, I've been in Ukraine for a few months leading up to the invasion. I was here in December and again in Kyiv for a month, just up to when the first bombs dropped. And there really has been there's been two things by way of kind of backstory. There's a sort of strategic mystery as to why Putin, after 20 years as a Russian leader, has decided now to seize and subjugate Ukraine. I mean, it's curious, and we can look at the politics. We can look at tensions with the West. We can look at transition in Germany, the weakness of the UK, the Biden administration, and so on. But I still think we're sort of missing something. I suspect it will emerge at some point. But also, there's another interesting thing, and this is where I completely agree with Gennadiy, that Putin completely misread the situation. And I don't know whether it's because he's been very isolated. He seems to sit at sort of 20 meters from people at the end of a table, or maybe he's been kind of misinformed by his spy agencies. But essentially, he sort of believed his own fairy tale that Ukraine is run by a pro-Western, corrupt, irredeemably Russophobic government headed by Volodymyr Zelensky, but the Ukrainians, ordinary Ukrainians, basically rural Russians who, a bit like Crimea, would welcome being liberated from fascism by these Russian troops. And it's an incredibly naive and ridiculous sort of portrait that's been put out on state media. From what we've heard and from what I've heard from my sources, the Russian soldiers sent into Ukraine were basically told they were on a kind of training exercise, and didn't even really realize what the hell was going on. They didn't realize they were being dispatched to war, in many cases to their deaths. Some of them, there were leaflets doing the rounds today on Ukrainian social media, where they were given a kind of briefing that they were defending their fatherland from fascism and so on. But basically, it's been an incredible failure. And the big story of the past week has been the way, as Gennadiy says, that the Ukrainian army has fought back, has resisted very bravely, and how the Kremlin has overreached itself. We've seen abandoned vehicles. We've seen Russian helicopters, including today, being blown out of the sky. We've seen a few Russian soldiers just giving up. We've also seen, you have to acknowledge, the Russian army moving steadily forward and taking territory, particularly in the south, around Kherson province, Melitopol. I was talking to people in Mariupol yesterday. Mariupol is now encircled and under heavy bombardment and attack. And this sort of land corridor that we before the war we kept on writing about, whether Russia could sort of seize, link up Crimean sort of territory with across the Sea of Azov to the east and the separatist regions, that is now kind of taking shape and coalescing. Plus, we've seen serious attempts by Russian troops and today Belarus forces to move in from the north and northwest and northeast and move on Kiev. But the attempts to take Kharkiv have failed. Their attempts to take Kiev have failed. It's clear these cities are well defended. It's clear that morale is high. I recorded a Guardian podcast today all about Volodymyr Zelensky, who I would say, critics of his now admire his indomitable spirit. I mean, he's come to symbolize Ukrainian resistance. He does these great videos in Kiev, looking gaunt and unshaven, but he's articulate. He still has kind of charm, and it's not over yet. And I think the problem for Putin going forward is, clearly what we've seen in the last 24, 48 hours is that he's moved. He's dumped this rhetoric of saying, I'm just exterminating Nazis and hitting military infrastructure. What we've seen today is an attempt to wipe out Ukrainian statehood, We've seen a devastating missile strike on the administration building in Kharkiv, on Freedom Square, miles away from any Ukrainian troops. But it's just to kind of demoralize, create chaos, dismay the population. In the last half hour, we've seen an attack on the TV tower in Kyiv. I mean, what has that got to do with the Ukrainian military? Nothing. It's basically a deliberate, cynical attempt to wipe Ukraine as a sovereign entity from the map. But what I don't really understand is what does victory look like for Putin? What is his end goal? I mean, how is he now he knows, or perhaps he doesn't know, that Ukrainians are not welcoming Russian occupiers with flowers, but are throwing Molotov cocktails at them, are demonstrating. There's extraordinary footage today from Melitopol where a group of Ukrainians in the rain have basically they're unarmed, have put themselves in front of a tank convoy and are just saying, go home, we don't want you here. And the Russian soldiers seem nonplussed. This doesn't kind of fit with their kind of cognitive map that they've been told, which is obviously a kind of lie. And sooner or later, it's going to have to dawn on the Kremlin that this plan is not really going to work. I mean, even if you take Kyiv, which I don't know if it's possible, but would take months to do, what kind of Ukraine are you going to run? How are you going to occupy it? How are you going to stop resistance? How are you going to stop Gennadiy and others from fighting a partisan war? I mean, the answer is that you're not. It's not really viable. And this is the problem. It's a failure of military strategy, but it's also a failure of ideas on behalf of the Russian leadership. And also, they forgot two things. They forgot, one, that Ukrainians are not Russians, that Ukrainians have always understood Russians better than Russians have understood Ukrainians. And two, that the greatest fighters during World War II were Ukrainian Soviet soldiers, that there is skill, there is expertise, there is bravery, that this army has come a long way since the debacle of 2014. With some Western assistance, but largely on its own efforts. And this is going to be a long and bitter struggle. I just say one other thing before I'm going to have to kind of sign off and leave you, which is just the human story. I mean, I was in Kyiv when it all started on Thursday morning. We kind of knew it was coming. We knew it was coming. Everybody knew there was going to be a bombardment that evening, and so there was. And I kind of woke up, and the hotel I was staying in, it's a few hundred meters away from the Golden Gate, 5 minutes walk from the Foreign Ministry, and 10 minutes from Independence Square. And so we all kind of filtered down, bleary-eyed, into our basement, and we were kind of very much journalists at that point. And about an hour in, this family walked into our basement, a mother with two kids. The kids were about 4 and 6, and they sort of sat down there. It was 6 in the morning. The kids had brought coloring books to color in as air raid sirens was going off, as bombs were dropping, and I found myself tearing up, because ultimately this is a war not about geopolitics. It's about human beings. It's about individuals, about kids, many of whom have been killed, including today. And it's astonishing that this is happening in Europe, that this is happening on our continent, this is happening in 2022. And I left Kyiv late on Thursday, out of the city, heading west, and there was this kind of vast human exodus. That there were thousands of people trying to flee. I was in a traffic jam at 3 in the morning. We came off the road at Zhytomyr, and I found myself at a petrol station talking to a 32-year-old web designer from Kyiv, fleeing with his wife and his 3 small kids. One of whom, little Tikhon, was 8 months old. In his romper suit, here he was kind of holding, and your heart breaks. I met someone else, a woman who had come from Sumy region in the far northeast. She had driven with her mother, her 9-year-old daughter, her pet dog, her sister, for 28 hours. She had driven 28 hours without sleeping, without stopping. She was basically crying, and her husband was there. The city was occupied by Russians. She wanted to go back. Her mother said she couldn't. She didn't know whether she would ever see her husband again. And there are thousands of stories like that, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And I don't know what happened to her. I mean, no one really knows what's happening to anybody at the moment. And I would just say that whatever assistance, I mean, I'm a journalist, I'm not an activist, I write books. You know, I spent time in Russia. I know that regime. I know the FSB. I know the leadership. I know their paranoid, conspiratorial, xenophobic worldview, shading into craziness. Is, you know, whatever assistance we can give to Ukraine now, whether it's arms, whether it's moral support, whether it's money, whether it is refugee status, whether it's membership of the European Union, whether it's Sukhoi jets, whether it is demonstrations in our cities, whether it is just, you know, thoughts, it all helps. It all helps, because this is a historic moment. This is the biggest crisis since 9/11 in global security, and now is the time to stand up, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. I know you have to go, but I mean, if there was one thing that the West could do now, I mean, immediately, what would it be? And what do you think it should be?
Well, look, I mean, you know, I could give you an elaborate answer, or I could give you kind of quite a funny answer. I asked the same question to Lviv's mayor, Andrei. I talked to him last night in his office. Rather a brilliant guy, actually. And I said, you know, what should we do? And he said, well, one thing you could do, you guys in London, is you could seize the villas of Russian oligarchs and use them to accommodate Ukrainian refugees. You know, take over Holland. Take over Holland Park. Take
Excellent
over Kensington.
idea.
Take over these ornate, largely empty Georgian supermansions in West London, bought with stolen money, all hidden offshore. Seize them and put Ukrainians there. I mean, what a powerful symbol that would be if you were to take Abramovich's double-fronted Belgravia villa and fill it with Ukrainian children and paint the Ukrainian flag on it. I mean, you know, maybe this is fantasy, but you know, there are things we could do. There are symbols we could show. Do it. I mean, the footage today of Boris Johnson with the Ukrainian journalists saying Abramovich's kids are living safely in London, enjoying life, while, you know, Ukrainian children are terrified, hiding in basements and in metro stations. I mean, again, I find myself tearing up, but something like that. I mean, you know, London has been London-grad for too long. Rich Russians have been allowed to steal in place of legal nihilism and to offshore their assets, you know, buy trophy properties in the West. We've let them do it. Now that has to stop.
Okay, thank you so much, Luke. Thanks for joining us. I know you have to go, and please stay safe.
Thank you.
So now I want to hand over
idea.
to are you going as well, Gennadiy, or you're staying?
No, I still stand.
Okay, wonderful. Because we need you to stay. I want to give the floor now to Vasyl for your insights and maybe your comments on what you think should be. I mean, the EU's response, the West's response, what more needs to be done.
Well, after these two so emotional speeches, it's quite difficult to speak. Maybe I also start with something very emotional to myself. Today, my dream came true. European Union accepted Ukraine's accession application. It's something which I started 25 years ago as young diplomat in the foreign ministry, and I thought the day when Ukraine's application will be accepted and Ukraine would be recognized as future EU member state should be the happiest day in my life. And now today, have you noticed, neither Luke nor Gennadiy even noticed that. If you analyze Ukrainian news, it's just one of secondary news. Some mention speech of Zelensky, maybe even less mentioned what European Parliament discussed about Ukraine. The whole society, the whole country is focused not on the EU, unfortunately. It's focused on our survival and guaranteeing our existence as a state tomorrow. So looking today at all this also emotional scenes of Zelensky's speech to European Parliament, I couldn't stop thinking, was it a price we had to pay for European perspective? Was it really we all had to go through to finally recognize that Ukraine may be one of EU member states? If we did in 2005, for example, when Ukraine started to ask for NATO membership action plan and EU application, and there will be more political will and a political foresight to give a positive answer, not to put us on hold, and by this giving Russians very different message that Europe and NATO don't care about Ukraine. I think if it was done 15 years ago, we would avoid this horrible war and horrible crisis. So let's hope what started today would bring us to EU one day. But I think today our key question is very different. How to survive as a state. We resisted the first attack. I like very much optimism of Gennadiy, and many friends of mine share the same. We showed them that we are state. We showed them how wrong was their calculation, but I think it's not yet over. Even more, it's very far from over. I think it's only beginning. It's only fifth day. We all knew it was going to happen. I always was saying, no, it will not happen, because any calculation of cost benefit shows that Putin will lose. It would be a horrible tragedy for Ukraine, but the same horrible tragedy for Russia. So any reason would just stop us of assumptions that Russians are going to do it. But they did. And in all their plans, which we've seen before, it was at least 14 days. And I feel that now we are getting really to a very tough and difficult moment when either both sides could get a certain compromise agreement. And we have some leaks of what was discussed on Ukrainian Belarusian border yesterday, and what can take place tomorrow or the day after during the second round. So it's certainly not what Russians probably wanted. It's certainly not giving them half of our land. It's certainly not becoming a region of Russian Federation. But still, they want something which is unacceptable for majority of Ukrainians. If we don't accept it, it means we are going to face this evil for yet another weeks and weeks, and maybe even months and months. No one has doubt we will win. I think we have already won, because morally, we all see Ukraine is right, Russia is wrong. Gennadiy referred to Maidan. I think it's different. Even at Maidan in 2014, we had Maidan and anti-Maidan. Part of Ukrainians were against of Maidan. Today, it's not like Maidan. Today, it's something very different. Even the most pro-Russian part of Ukrainian society, they all are shocked to what Russians have done to our land. So today we're really united, and if one day we need to write about Ukrainian nation building, I think last Thursday it was the day when Ukrainian nation was really born, because all of us are united by our country, by future we see in our country, and by willingness to defend our country. But the question is, will we go for a compromise now with Russians to save infrastructure, to save human suffering, and to live some years, whatever will be agreed, it doesn't matter, because society know who we are, what we want, and we will do it, whatever will be written. Or we will go for longer period of conflict, because big part of society really accepts no compromise. We should defeat them. We should go to liberate Crimea, to liberate Donbass, and they are wrong. They attacked us. They have to pay the price. So the biggest question which I asked myself as political analyst, as former diplomat, just to answer myself as a question, what's option more preferable? Should we go for a compromise which would increase losses, which would decrease losses and decrease human suffering? or we should fight whatever is cost. I have no answer. I have no answer.
Gennadiy has an answer.
In any
Vasyl.
case, well, I have no answer. I don't want to be the one now to take the responsibility for one or for another choice. But what I know for sure that Western assistance in one or another way is crucially important. And when you ask it that we should give some very concrete recommendations, what we should do, what we should ask European Union, US, Western partners to help us with, I wanted to list some points. First of all, Russia must become a new North Korea. Russia must be fully isolated, not only economically, but diplomatically, politically. No one would give hand them after what they have done to us. It must be not only sanctions which were announced, but every sanction you can imagine must be imposed on them. They deserved the worst possible payment they have to pay for what they have done. With this, point number two, if they are North Korea, we must be a new South Korea. There must be a plan which should be now, at least on our table, to start discussing how to build up this infrastructure destruction, how to rehabilitation of the country. Even if it stopped today, losses we have are horrible. We lost 1 million people, I presume. By the most optimistic calculations, it did before. Others say it will be up to 7 million refugees. To lose 4 or 7 million citizens, it will have horrible social and economic consequences. I hope they will all return, but I'm afraid not immediately. But this is already something which will impact our society for many, many years, maybe decades. Burned houses, destroyed buildings, bridges, which all are burned. So it all has to be rehabilitated, and plan how to return country to normal must be prepared. But it's a long-term plan. For short-term, I think the most important is now to provide Ukraine with efficient arms, and I think our authorities already informed quite well what we need: anti-missile defense, anti-air defense, assistance to fight on the air. It's something really vitally important. So there should be any limits with providing Ukraine with military assistance. And of course, human dimension. We are getting into, I would not say human catastrophe yet, but in Mariupol, maybe we should, or Volnovakha, we should already say humanitarian catastrophe, but humanitarian crisis for sure. In Kyiv, which is encircled by Russian forces, and deliveries of food not easy. In other cities which are encircled by Russians, we must today start bringing humanitarian assistance to ensure that people will not be just suffering not only from Russian bombs, but also because of lack of food or water or medicine. So it was what should be done today, and assistance to Ukrainian war refugees. It's already not bad. We see that they are welcomed in EU member states. I think it should be one of elements of fast EU integration, just to bring people in, to give them automatically without all this long, sometimes humiliating procedure, all the documents, all the permissions, helps them to be back to normal as soon as possible. Let them feel that they are at home while they left their home in Ukraine. So it's two key elements what we have to do now.
Thank you, Vasyl. I'm going to give the floor back now to Gennadiy, because I can see that he is anxious to put some points, and maybe Gennadiy, I can also put this question that we have in the box was asking how high is the threat to the supply chain of military equipment provided by European states? How high is the threat of this supply chain? I mean, of getting the stuff where you need it.
Okay, thank you for. I just want to reply to Vasyl's question because he's still out, but guys who are in Ukraine in the battlefield know the answer quite clear. That there any other solution apart from full full Ukrainian territories, all Ukrainians will be back to Ukraine. If president signs something like Minsk III or say, okay, stay whenever we stay now, it will mean just nothing less than civil war in Ukraine. Because unlike Putin, in Ukraine, the room for maneuver of the government very small. Just one example. It's one of the most strategic place in Ukraine, the Lubrani airport, which is the only airport within the Kyiv city, like a beltway. Now defended not by the armed forces, it's defended by the volunteers. And who they are so devoted, and their leader headed by the dismissed General Krivanov, who came to the airport when it was empty. And I communicate with these guys very, very closely. Most of them are my friends. Just yesterday, we just taken their injured fighters and driving them to the hospital. I know this spirit. If Zelensky try to do something like what will mean capitulate before Putin? The guy stormed his office, and it biggest threat for him than Russian missiles, because unlike Russian soldiers, they guys are so devoted and brave. So for Ukraine, it's just one option, one realistic option. To not get in the civil war, it will be catastrophe and the real victory of the Putin. He should go to the end, at least until Ukrainian borders. That is what on the ground, because now not armed forces, not police, not National Guard controls territory on the ground. I drive through Ukraine a couple 3-4 days ago. Every village, every helmet, every city have its own territory defense. I know almost everybody in the government. Even say, I could tell to the Ministry of Internal Affairs and say, you, who I am, guys, doesn't matter. You should talk to us because it is our village. So that for sure, in some key points, the political leadership is matter, but the corridor or room for maneuver is very narrow. Just fight, fight, fight until victory. And that is the message to our government, to the West, and to the Russia. And unlike Vasyl, I now more afraid about Russian statehood. I have no doubts that Ukrainian statehood survive. For me, it's a huge question how Russians survive, because they wasn't prepared for such experience. Now they have huge inflation. They was stopped to traveling throughout the world. A lot of style of life to which they used to now just cut off. So that for Ukrainians, at least for my circles, and that is again, in Ukraine, that is not like Europe or the US. That is people matters far more than the government do or does. And now it is start time for Zelensky. Why? Because he has just understood the feeling of the people. Unlike these real casualties, unlike these devastating attacks, unlike the loss of some small cities, towns, and villages, there are people are really ready and willing to fight. So now we believe that is the time to return Crimea, return Donbass in the motherland heaven, how the Putin say. So that is, for me, that is just choice. And it would be strategic mistake of Ukrainian president if he decides meet somewhere on the middle, because it means he became enemy for a part of most devoted and most motivated Ukrainians. Again, one of the most strategic points in Kyiv was left but National Guard. Nobody from the armed forces defended the best place for the Russian parachutists. And people without any ranks, without military affiliation, just took over it. Now they have automats, they have shelling guns, they have mines, and so on and so forth, without any official status. I just visited them a couple of years ago. That is about Ukraine. And fortunately, there is no something anarchic in this. They really cooperate quite well with some official generals who heard very carefully of these volunteers guys. And last question, I think the idea to confiscate the real estate, first of all, real estate of the Russian oligarchs, and to transform them into refugee shelters is a great idea, because it's not just very practical, this is very symbolic. And finally, my message is very clear. It is not just the Putin crimes. The people who always have a choice. If we believe that not just the Hitler, but a lot of his fellows who executed like a genocide should be punished and were punished, that is about Russians, because they just allow this horrible regime. Finally, most of them really love Putin, support Putin, voted for him. So that is every Russians are now responsible for these horrible sins. Not just Putin, not just these internal circles, but every Russian citizen should bear the burden of this invasion. And finally, I hope that Ukrainians stop on their border and not go to Russia when we win.
Yeah. May I just ask you, Gennadiy, the question on supply chains
Yeah,
of
okay.
the military, if you wouldn't mind answering this one.
Yeah, to the best of my understanding, it's quite fine, because we now see that a lot of missiles was broken in the air. So some of them really put on the land, unfortunately exploded like it was in Kharkiv. But the things which could be done just by armed forces, like jet fighters, like anti-missile defense, they work it quite well. So and that means that your help, military help, armed help, was really very timely. And now I haven't heard any information about the shortage of the Western arms and weapons. So I hope it's well, but I'm not insider in this.
Thank you. I have another couple of questions here. The first one is asking about public opinion in the so-called Donbass enclaves. Has it been tested recently about their preferred future? If so, what is the results? And the second question is asking, if the West continues to increase the sanctions, is it possible that Russia could go for the nuclear option and attack the Baltic states or another country in response to this? I mean, what's the threat of this? I'll give to both of you.
Mine?
Well,
Yeah,
maybe I give. I just.
Yeah. I don't know about opinion.
To rest and think. So,
sorry. It was question to me. Sorry.
Yeah, you go ahead, Gennadiy, and then Vasyl can also answer.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry. I don't know about the opinion on Donbass. At least people with whom I communicate, for example, in the Severodonetsk, for them that is really painful. In some towns like Stanitsa, Luganska, I'm completely agree with Vasyl. that is a humanitarian catastrophe already on the ground. So that's not question to me. But the second one, that is really most horrible option. At least some of my fellows who are military veterans believe that the Putin could use this nuclear option, but strike the Kyiv, because for him that is something very humiliating. His armed forces, Great Russia, couldn't just surround and take over the Ukrainian capital, and that is like a existential threat for himself, because if he couldn't take over the Kyiv, it means that the Putin is not so powerful like he seems. So that is most horrible option from all of that. And I believe he don't need to use nuclear weapons to strike, for example, Baltic states or Warsaw or things like that, because here his problem now here in Ukraine, he humiliating in Ukraine every day and every hour. And Russian is not like a China. There are a lot of Russian who I know personally became quite brave, sent to me some letter of support or chat with me in some messenger and say that you are great guys. So if he not win, he lost. So there is not win-win solution in this in current, and that I afraid he could use the worst option possible. That's true.
Okay, thank you, Gennadiy. I'll also let Vasyl comment on those questions. And we also have a question asking what will be the next steps now in this EU process? I mean, that Ukraine would be accepted as a candidate. What next?
Some very interesting questions. I will start from the last mentioned. You know what is usual procedure. Council asks Commission for opinion, Commission studies. So it's years of internal processes and 3-4 years of negotiations. So if we talk about it, certainly it's not adequate to the situation. There must be fast track. Moreover, we have been talking about EU accession since 1998. We all know there is a group of professionals from both sides who know each other very well, and markets are quite well integrated. Legislation is quite well promoted in line with acquis. So if there is a political will, and as I understand, it is a political will, and it is one of very few instruments EU has at its possession to influence the situation, then there should be fast track. Commission, I think, if they decided, could make this opinion in days, maybe in a week, and then decision should be really very fast, and we could really come to accession agreement in months or two. I think if there is a wish and political will, it can be done. It's realistic. It's not square one in bilateral relations. It's not a country which EU officials do not know. Everyone knows what is Ukraine, and channels of communication and certain trust existed before, and now it's basically one team. So I think it's possible to do very quickly. On recent public opinion in so-called Donbas enclaves, yes. Ukrainian Institute of the Future made studies of the public opinion in both parts of Donetsk, Luhansk Oblast. Well, I might be mistaken in exact date, but it was last year, I think June. They published in June, so maybe they did it 1 year ago. Public opinion in controlled territory was no surprise. Everything is okay. People see only Ukraine as their future. Public opinion in not controlled territories was, let's say, two sides. One side was that, yes, they still remember what was Ukraine, and there is still sympathy to a common house which existed before. I think it was even majority of people who said we would like to be back to Ukraine. Part of them agreed to be back to Ukraine even without any preconditions. Others mentioned, yes, Minsk implementation. I think it was 50-50 from this, maybe 55-60%. But what was really dangerous, strong increase of Russian passports and Russian citizens in the region, people who were directly linked with Russia by social, economic, and other channels, and imagine their future as a part of Russia or Russia-controlled territory. Again, they were not majority. They were maybe 20-25%, but it's a lot. And again, it was Ukraine or Ukrainian institution social poll. So we have also taken into account to what extent it was sincere. But as of 1 week ago, I would still imagine that majority of people on not controlled territory had seen their future in Ukraine. What happened over last week is difficult to predict how it influenced their perception. This artificial movement of refugees from Donetsk, Luhansk to Rostov was like a tragic comedy. People understood no one threatened their life. People understood they were used to make footage for Russian movies. If first day some movement was more or less serious, starting from the day 2 when Russians tried to organize this refugees flows, no one wanted to go. Everyone understood it was just play, and no one expected them in Rostov. And people were trying to return, and who was able to return, they returned. So I think it's a wake-up call for them as well. And watching this whole attacks on Kharkiv and Kyiv, I think even those in Donbass who considered that truth was on their side, they had to wake up and understand that they were basically cheated by Russian propaganda. Concerning realistic, acceptable solution for Ukraine, Putin has to demonstrate at home that he has achieved something. It's exactly what I said words at the beginning, and what Gennadiy said. There are two options. These options and how they were discussed in during a meeting of two delegations. Option one, there would be an agreement. An agreement would be point one, neutrality, and actually very few in Ukraine would consider this as something which we can't do. Everyone understood we will not be in upcoming future. Everyone accepted that we have to fight ourselves, and the West will help us only with arms, sanctions, but not with troops. So neutrality, but again, with country fully armed, with country capable to defend itself, and we have witnessed how it's possible. Neutrality will not be really the biggest problem on the road. But there are some other points which might be really difficult for Ukrainians, not even those who are with arms like Gennadiy, but just normal Ukrainians to accept. For example, Crimea. Crimea is an issue of principles. Again, if there is innovative diplomacy and ideas and good negotiating atmosphere and goodwill from both sides, you can find out possible compromise. But now it would be even more difficult than before. Recognition of Luhansk, Donetsk, so-called People's Republic. Well, again, big question whether it would be acceptable or not acceptable. On one side, we didn't control them before, so let them be as they are. Even if we talk to them, goddamn, the most important to get Russian army out of Ukraine and to rebuild our country. Now, no one doubts that if we have Russians out and we started to rebuild, the country would be in 5-7 years really the one which we dreamed all our life about Ukraine. Demilitarization is non-starter. I don't know what exactly Russians meant under demilitarization, but how you can take arms from people like Gennadiy or 100,000 Ukrainians who received their Kalashnikovs to defend their homes. How can you tell this? How you can even dare to tell this? It's non-starter. Certainly, and it's not Russian business. Are we militarized or not? We are independent country, and we may defend ourselves. And they showed we have to defend ourselves against them. So it's non-starter. Even worst point is so-called denazification. Well, it should be Russia, which should be denazified because they showed themselves as really Nazis in the way how they behave and how they attacked Ukraine. What they meant, law on Russian language. Well, it's a laughable point. If to remove all Russian 150,000 soldiers and tanks back to Ukraine, we need to accept law on Russian language, which in any case is not an issue in Ukraine. Well, again, maybe Gennadiy would answer this question whether he would agree to adopt this law to get all the Russian army out of Ukraine. As for me, it would be not overcomable problem. It would be in by majority of parliament. As for me, it would be again. We have a dynamic which is very different from what we used to have before the war and at the first days of the war. Now dynamic is different, and to have internal discussions, to have discussions with different groups of stakeholders who are with arms defending their country, it's probably a precondition for Zelensky to make any decision on any possible peace deal.
Okay, thank you very much, Vasyl. I think we've now run out of time because we passed 5:30. So I really want to thank you for coming and speaking today. Particularly to you, Gennadiy, because I know that every time you step outside into the street, you're putting your life at risk. What you do is incredibly brave and courageous, and you're not just doing it for Ukraine, you're doing it for the whole of Europe, you're doing it for me. So I thank you very much. I hope that your very good friend that's sitting on the couch next to you, that big gun, will be with you at all times. I really wish that this war is over as quickly as possible. Really, I do. And that Ukraine will rise from this. I have absolutely no doubt. But I wish you all the courage in the world. I hope that the partners in the West, they need to keep giving you everything that you absolutely want. Thank you really again for joining us today. Thank you, Vasyl, for joining us today. EPC will be very active on Ukraine. We have another event on Thursday with civil society, an event on Friday looking at the refugee crisis. So it will be a top priority in our work going forward. So once again, thank you. Please stay safe. Please stay very safe. We're all watching, and I hope to see you again very soon, Gennadiy. Thank you.
Welcome. I just want you to show that the office converted in this like a base of the fighters. That is really,
yeah. Where are your guys? Are you? Yeah.
Really inspiring.
Hi, guys.
One of them, yeah. Just
hello.
Hello, guys. That's our medics preparing medicine here. Just because it's a bit.
Hello, guys. Hello, your
hello,
hero.
Guys. Hello, guys. Hello, guys.
Hello.
That is
wow. You're doing an amazing job.
Writer and banker who is. That is fighters. So that is just how it seems in the office of one think tank. So Ukrainian undefendable. Just believe me.
Ukrainians are undefeatable. I totally believe that.
Yeah. Undefeatable, sure, for sure.
We're with you. I'm with you. We're all with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your support and for your invitation again.
No, thank you. God bless you.